Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak up for this budget, and it's a great pleasure to follow on from the honourable member for Ipswich. And I have to say that he did identify a number of important issues, all to illustrate that there is always more to be done. And there are some things I'm really enthusiastic about in relation to this budget, and there are some things that I would like to ask questions about of the Treasury bench. I firstly very warmly welcome the freeze on fuel duty. Private car use is not a nice to have in rural Stirlingshire. It's an absolute necessity. And may I ask my right honourable friend to look again at the extent of the rural fuel rebate scheme, because there are some glaring anomalies in my part of the world, and I would urge my right honourable friend to take another look. And I'd also warmly welcome the freeze-in duty in both spirits and beer. This may sound strange for someone that's a teetotaler, but this is good news for Stirling, because there are more than 100 pubs and thousands of people employed in Stirling in the leisure sector. So it's all good news too for Stirling's distillers and brewers. And I also welcome the funding announcement for universal credit, something I've spoken on several times in this House, and helping people to get into work and making sure that work always pays is something that we must get right. I also welcome the commitment to spend more on our defences. There is a recognition, I think, in the government that there is a changing landscape of threat which we must respond to as a nation. And I commend the Chancellor and his team for taking seriously the plight of the High Street. And as a Conservative, I find it a strange sensation to welcome the very idea of a new tax. But the introduction of an online tax for internet giants will do something to level the playing field between the massive online retailers and high street retailers. And it's an essential and pragmatic approach, and part, I hope, of an overarching modernisation of the business tax regime. I would mention King Street in Stirling as one of our main shopping thoroughfares. I've mentioned it before in the House. It's a street that has many retail and leisure properties. Some of whom, but not many, receive rates relief through the Small Business Bonus Scheme. All of them, however, would benefit from a one-third reduction in rates that we will see in England. It would save restaurants like Monterey Jack's or a shop like Contempo across the other side of King Street in the region of £3,000 a year. And these are real numbers which could be to the advantage of current retailers in Stirling if the Scottish Government adopted the same policy as in England. It is time to take action on the High Street. We need vision and imagination for the future of our high streets, and I can see so much going on in this budget, but which Scotland will not benefit from unless the Scottish Government shows some of the invention and imagination that we heard from the Chancellor on Monday. And finally, I have 3 questions for my right honourable friend, which I hope he will give consideration to. I welcome the £200 million for the British Business Bank and the setting up of a team for the British Business Bank in Scotland. But I have to say, I remain concerned that we need to do more to create a bigger stream of high-quality patient capital. The British Business Bank is a good vehicle, but it needs a broader remit. There is something more yet to be done to replace the European Investment Bank as a source of patient capital, and I'd like to ask my right honourable friend for his assessment of the ready availability and quality of patient capital in our economy. And it is right that we have an industrial strategy for the whole of the UK, and it's right that we have an industrial strategy challenge fund for the whole of the UK. And I am now seeking assurances from my right honourable friend that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund will also be a UK-wide fund, unlike the National Productivity Investment Fund, because my heart skipped a beat when I heard about the £200 million to be invested in rural broadband, full fibre broadband, the real McCoy. But then I learned it was to be funded by the National Productivity Investment Fund, which means that Scotland will not get anything. Now that is something that I deeply regret. I'm looking for assurances from the Treasury bench about what will be done to get rural broadband planted in rural Scotland. Because currently the Scottish Government is doing next to nothing. They are a frustration to the work of connecting rural Scotland. And I would also mention another side issue, but I will take this opportunity to mention it, and that is the misleading advertising that consumers are subject to in our country currently about super-fast, full fibre broadband, when it's not at all. It's copper. And we should, I think, insist on these companies telling the truth and the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to our consumers. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Tracy Brabin.